So one of the things I get asked all the time is, what's the best way to learn the drums? And there's quite a few, but I think the three top ways are learn yourself, buy an online course, or go to a teacher. They're all good options. Let's talk about the pros and cons of each of them. By the way, I've been writing about this stuff for years. I wrote an ebook. It's called The Ultimate Survival Guide for Beginner Drummers. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you how you can get your free copy. So the first one is learn for free by yourself. Back in the day when I was learning to play the drums, that meant just putting on a pair of headphones and playing along to my favourite songs and just learning by trial and error. And I was, for the most part, a self-taught drummer. But it does take a lot of time. And for beginners nowadays, they want to learn properly, but they want to learn quickly. So that option, less effective nowadays. What is really good though is that we now have YouTube, and we can pretty much learn anything we want on YouTube, but there's definitely some pros and cons to that. So obviously the biggest pro is lots of online content, completely free, but the cons obviously are there's a lot of content and it's completely free. So let's talk about that. Content, it can be overwhelming. There's thousands and thousands of videos. Some are really, really good, some are not so good, and you have to really just be very, very patient and go through all the options, because at the end of the day it's free and you get what you pay for, and free is free. So if you're prepared to search through what I often call the good, bad and the ugly of online drum lessons, then you can find some good, no doubt there's some good content on there. The credibility gap is a big one though. You have to watch that. Nowadays anyone can upload a video to YouTube, right? You got a smartphone, you got something to say, you can put it on YouTube. And the problem with that is that you're getting a lot of people that probably aren't the best teachers imparting advice, and you just got to watch out for that. On the other hand, like I say, if you're prepared to search, there's some really good teachers on YouTube that are giving away free lessons. The problem with that is that it rarely comes with structure. You can watch one video, but then good luck trying to find the next video that builds logically upon that step and then logically into the next step. And it's just very, very rare to find that on YouTube. The other thing about YouTube, obviously, is there's no feedback. So you're not really checking in with the teacher or understanding if you're actually practicing correctly. And while we're talking of practice, how do you structure your practice? I mean, if you're not getting structured lessons, how do you know what to practice next? How do you even know what you're working on is really that important? So I think the complete lack of structured guidance for me is the biggest con for learning by yourself. But it's an option and millions of people do it. The second is buy an online course, right? There's plenty of good online courses out there. I do one myself. It's called Drum Ambition. But you really have to find one that works for you. Drum Ambition, for example, is targeted for beginner drummers, and it walks people step by step through that process. There are other courses that are more advanced. And my friend Louis Palmer, for example, does a brilliant course called Play Better Drums, but that's definitely for more advanced players. So if you can tailor a course that meets your requirements, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate or you've got a little bit more experience, then those online courses can be great, because let's talk about the pros. Typically, there's structure to them. You can obviously do these online lessons on your own schedule. There's no travel involved or anything like that. And if you're deciding if you want to go and visit a teacher, doing online lessons is a great prep to doing that, because honestly, there's so much you can do by yourself before you even need to go and sit with a teacher. And the better prepared you are, the better value you're going to get out of those lessons, not just in terms of money saved, but progress made. The cons of buying an online course, well, depending on the course you've bought, there can be a complete lack of feedback. And again, that's a big deal, isn't it? How do you know you're progressing or practicing the right thing, or you're developing the good techniques? Now, some online courses get around that really well. Not to blow my own trumpet, but my course, I check in regularly on video chats with my students, so I give them that opportunity. Not every online course does, so you just have to watch out for that when you're doing your research. And the third thing is visit a teacher. Well, actually, you don't have to visit a teacher now. You can go to a teacher, or you can check in online with a teacher. So let's talk about both options. Visiting a teacher in person is how traditional drum lessons were always taught. You go in, You sit in the same room with the teacher and you go through your exercises. And actually, that's probably the best way to learn drums, in my humble opinion. However, this is is a big world, and not everybody has access to a drum teacher, and there might be 100 reasons why a drum teacher doesn't work for you. You might not have one in your area, they might be too expensive, the travel schedule might not work. There might be a variety of reasons why visiting a teacher doesn't work for you, but it is a very, very good way to learn the drums. If you've got a good drum teacher, I'd like to think they'll tailor their lessons towards your goals. So for example, if somebody comes to me as a teacher and says, I don't want to learn stuffy music theory, I would just like to learn how to play along to this song, I'm going to help them achieve that goal. I'll also pepper in why these little more traditional nuances are important along the way, but I'll make sure they're achieving their goal first and foremost. And that can also turn into a con for visiting the drum teacher, which is sometimes you do get stuck with traditional kind of stuffy drum teachers that have a very set way of doing it and a set curriculum, and they're going to teach this way or no way at all, and sometimes you can get a clash of personalities in that respect. But the other cons of visiting a drum teacher are, number one, obviously cost. I did some research just for this video, and I'm finding that people are advertising drum lessons from $50, $60 for 30 minutes up to $90, $100 for an hour, and clearly that is a significant investment. I'm not saying it's unreasonably priced. I mean, these are professionals and you have to pay for their time, but that is a lot of money. And if you think that you do, let's say, 10 hours of drum lessons, it's $1,000. Back to my point earlier, you could buy an online course and get really well prepared and cover the majority of that stuff that you'll do with a drum teacher from day one on your own time for a fraction of the money. So it's just something to be aware of. And then, as we've discussed, can you get to the drum teacher? Can you make your schedule work with their schedule? Do you have to travel? These are all also considerations. Honestly, I think one of the biggest pros of working with a good drum teacher is they'll always give you practice tips, and you should always know what you're working on next. As I've already mentioned, when you're working online, or by yourself, or depending on what online course you might be looking at, sometimes those next steps aren't always obvious, and that can be really frustrating. And that's a real benefit of working in person with a drum teacher. So if being in the same room as a drum teacher is not an option for you for any of the reasons we've talked about, you do have the option to do online lessons. So I'm thinking about Zoom lessons here, right? Where you can pick a drum teacher that's located anywhere in the world, actually, and schedule a Zoom lesson with them. And these can be good too, but it doesn't really get rid of the cost factor, because again, I was looking into those Zoom lessons and they can be as expensive actually as sitting with a drum teacher in person. But the major con of that, I'm talking pros and cons, the major con of that is, well, your drum teacher may have a multi-camera setup and be able to show you all the things that they're talking about very effectively, and they may have microphones on their drums, or if they're using electric drums, they're going directly into a mixer and everything sounds great and you can watch and learn from them. But what about if you flip that, right? Can they see you properly? Do you have a multi-camera setup at home? Probably not. Do you have great audio? You might not. You might just be using your iPhone audio or whatever. And trust me, when you're playing real drums, acoustic drums, it doesn't work well with your iPhone speakers. Yes, you can see them. Yes, you can learn from them. But can they see you? Can they hear you? Can they really give you structured feedback about how you're doing in that situation? So again, if the answer to all of that is yes, then that could be an option for you, but it is just something to be aware of when you're learning by Zoom. Honestly, I personally don't think Zoom lessons work, and it's a bit controversial. A lot of teachers would totally disagree with that, and there's also a lot of people that are learning that have had great experience with Zoom lessons. But think about it, no one was doing Zoom lessons before the pandemic. You had to go to a drum teacher, or you had to learn by watching videos. No one was doing live Zoom lessons because everybody understood the limitations to them. Nowadays it's just accepted as another revenue form for teachers, but to be fair, it's making teachers more accessible to people that don't have access. So again, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying I personally don't think that option works. So those are your three options. The important thing is you've got to do what's right for you, and you might experiment with all of these things, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's never been a better time to learn drums because of all the options that are available to you. So whether you learn for free by yourself, whether you buy an online course, or whether you visit a teacher online or in person, these are all great options. And the point is, what a great time it is to learn the drums. A moment ago I told you about my ebook. It's called The Ultimate Survival Guide for Beginner Drummers. It's over 40 chapters of everything I learned from a decade running a drum store, 2 decades of teaching. If you'd like a free copy, let me know in the comments and I'll let you know how to get one. In the meantime, thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.